Today we're talking about serious things, my friends. The future of coach Antonio Pierce is hanging in the balance. With a 2-8 record, the accumulated losses put our commander at the center of the discussions. Is Pierce the answer to the rebuild, or is it time to change course? We'll break it down in 10 topics full of emotion, analysis, and that pinch of hope that every Raiders fan carries in their heart. Hold on tight, because this script is hot. The season began with a mix of optimism and expectation. After Josh McDaniels left, Antonio Pierce took over as an interim coach with the face of a leader. Confident, motivating, and with the us against the world mentality that fans love. The game against the Giants, when we won with authority, seemed like a harbinger of something great. However, what started as a glimmer of hope quickly fizzled out. Since then, the Raiders have accumulated losses and, more importantly, have shown no clear signs of improvement on the field. The defense, which promised to be the team's pillar, has begun to falter. The offense, led by inconsistent quarterbacks, has been a headache for everyone. This decline is not just a question of results. It is about how the team presents itself, with clear problems of discipline and execution. And then comes the inevitable question: is it only the players' responsibility, or does the coaching staff need to change? Injuries, as always, have been a thorn in the side of the Raiders this season. Defenders like Marcus Peters and Divine Deablo, key players in the scheme, have missed important games. The impact of these absences has been direct on the defensive performance. Even Max Crosby, our warrior, has not been able to carry the team alone. Despite this, the NFL is a brutal sport where injuries are a part of the game. Other teams face similar adversities and find ways to adapt. What the Raiders lack is not only the physical health, but also the depth on their roster to overcome these difficulties. And that is something that falls on the front office, of course, but also on the coach. Antonio Pierce is known as a locker room guy, a leader who motivates players. But is that just enough? Injuries aside, the Raiders made basic mistakes that cannot be ignored. And that brings us to the offense, which has been the most disappointing aspect of the season. The Raiders' offense is a case of pure frustration. Even with Davante Adams, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, the offensive production has been disastrous. The problem starts at the team's most important position, quarterback. Whether it's Jimmy Garoppolo, Aiden O'Connell, or Brian Hoyer, none of them have been able to bring stability to the sector. The offensive line, which should protect and open spaces, has also been disappointing. The lack of consistency in the ground plays, which depend heavily on Josh Jacobs, makes the job easier for opposing defenses. The result? Short drives, turnovers, and a chronic inability to convert third downs. And as if that weren't enough, the offensive calls have also been criticized for their lack of creativity. There's no rhythm, no identity. For a team that has had historic attacks, this is a huge disappointment. And the drama only increases when Davante Adams' name comes into play. If there's one player who deserves more, it's Davante Adams. The wide receiver came to the Raiders as a star, but this season has been far from brilliant for him. Adams' frustration has been evident at various times, whether with poorly thrown passes or the lack of opportunities on the field. But the biggest controversy came off the field. Earlier this season, Antonio Pierce liked an Instagram post that suggested Adams might leave the Raiders. The move sparked a wave of criticism from both the media and fans. Pierce, to his credit, apologized, but the damage had already been done. Adams is a central figure on the team. His relationship with the coach can influence the rest of the squad. If the star player is unhappy, how can he motivate the rest? This is one of the most complex challenges Pierce faces at such a delicate time. A coach is measured not only by his leadership in the locker room, but also by his decisions on the field. And in that regard, Antonio Pierce has been lacking. A clear example was his decision to punt on 4th and 1 from the Chargers' 43-yard line in Week 1. That decision, which was widely criticized, resulted in an 8.5% reduction in the team's chances of winning. That wasn't the only conservative call that cost him dearly. Throughout the season, Pierce has avoided taking risks that could have changed the course of games. That's particularly frustrating for a fan base accustomed to the aggressive style that defined the Raiders' identity for decades. Of course, such decisions aren't easy. But in the NFL, the price of caution can be high. Pierce hasn't yet shown the courage needed to lead a rebuilding team like the Raiders. Can he learn and adapt? Or is his time running out? Despite so much criticism, Antonio Pierce remains as the Raiders' interim coach. The main reason? The support of the players. Pierce is respected in the locker room and has managed to keep the team motivated, even in the midst of a disastrous season. Furthermore, firing a coach mid-season could create even more instability. The Raiders' front office, led by Mark Davis, appears willing to let Pierce finish the job before making a final decision. After all, what the Raiders need right now is stability. But will that be enough to save their position? The future looks uncertain, especially with so many possible roster changes for 2024. Even if Antonio Pierce finishes the season as head coach, the truth is that his future is in doubt. With a 2-8 record and a series of criticisms of his work, he is not seen as a long-term solution by much of the media and analysts. The Raiders management, led by Mark Davis, has already shown that it is not afraid to make drastic changes. Additionally, the upcoming offseason promises to be turbulent for the team. Key players could leave the team, especially in areas where talent is scarce. Davante Adams, who has already expressed frustration, could be a name to watch. If the team goes through a significant overhaul, it makes sense to bring in a new coach to lead this rebuilding phase. Still, there is a chance, albeit a slim one, that Pierce will convince the board to keep him. To do so, he will need to show progress in the final games of the season, either in terms of results or at least in the team's attitude on the field. He will have to prove that he deserves the job, even with all the adversity. Antonio Pierce has been one of the most talked about names when it comes to coaches on the hot seat. Sterling C. of the Sporting News lists Pierce as one of the 5 coaches closest to losing his job this season. Despite this, he notes that Pierce is unlikely to be fired mid-season due to the impact it could have on the locker room. Other publications, such as Sports Illustrated, are more cautious, noting that Pierce is facing issues beyond his control. Injuries, a lack of depth on the roster, and even management decisions are all factors that complicate the situation. However, his questionable choices on the field and drama with players like Davante Adams also weigh against him. The truth is that the media is divided, as are the fans. While some believe that Pierce deserves more time to implement his ideas, others see his lack of experience as an insurmountable obstacle for the Raiders. Raiders Nation is passionate, loyal, and of course, demanding. Antonio Pierce's situation has fans divided. Some believe he deserves more time, especially since he took over a team amid the chaos left by Josh McDaniels. They argue that Pierce's energy and passion are rare and valuable qualities. On the other hand, there is a segment of the fan base that has had enough patience. For these fans, the 2-8 record and lack of improvement on the team are proof enough that Pierce is not the right coach to lead the Raiders into the future. They are clamoring for a more experienced name, someone who can return the team to its glory days. What is undeniable is that Raiders fans want results. This is one of the most passionate fan bases in the NFL, and accepting back-to-back losing seasons is not in keeping with the team's identity. The pressure is coming from all sides. The upcoming games will be crucial in determining Antonio Pierce's future. With tough matches ahead, the coach will have to find ways to keep his team competitive despite the limitations of his squad. Any win in this scenario could be seen as a sign of progress and help make the case for his continued presence. However, expectations are low, both from fans and the media. With so many structural problems on the team, it is hard to imagine that Pierce will be able to significantly turn things around. For many, the season is already lost, and the focus should be on rebuilding for 2024. Regardless of what happens, one thing is certain: the Raiders need to make bold decisions at the end of the season. Whether it's retaining Pierce or hiring a new head coach, it's time to give the franchise a clear direction and rebuild the identity that made the Raiders one of the most feared teams in NFL history.